Hells Angels gik i dag til angreb på araber og muslimer ved at lægge et manifest ud, hvor de blæser til kamp.
Jeg var oprigtigt overbevist om, at det var en racekonflikt, og at det var muslimerne mod HA.
Jeg er ikke i tvivl om, at politiet har brugt så mange ressourcer på at bekæmpe Hells Angels og Bandidos, at der er andre kriminelle grupperinger, der ligesom er gået under radaren. Så derfor der kan man sige, at gadebanderne de er helt uforstyrret kunne vokse sig større i kølvandet på den store nordiske rockerkrig.
Hele bandemiljøet, det var ligesom en ny start, en ny æra i den kriminelle underverden, parallelt med rockermiljøet.
This is Biker History with Magnus. The Great Nordic Biker War between the Hells Angels and Bandidos finally came to an end after several years of bloodshed and terror in the 90s and early 2000s.
Så vi gør jo alt, hvad vi kan for ikke at skabe nogle stemninger og så videre. Fordi vi ved jo godt, at vi har jo opskræmt befolkningen efter den der store nordiske rockerkrig, hvor der er blevet både fyret raketter og bomber og alt muligt af.
The war had one clear winner, and it was neither of the two biker clubs. Because according to biker journalists and law enforcement, it was the police who were the real winners.
Når man er i krig med hinanden, som vi så i den store nordiske rockerkrig, så er fokus for politi og myndighederne generelt jo skærpet endnu mere, end det var i forvejen. De har selv været med til at grave deres egen grav ved at være så synlige og så åbenlyse i deres voldelige handlinger og deres kriminalitet.
But the police were not the only ones that had gained on the biker war, because while the police had focused their efforts against Hells Angels and Bandidos, a new group had grown and gone almost undetected, namely the new immigrant gangs. Growing in size and dominance, these new gangs were beginners compared to the bikers, who now, according to biker journalists and police, started to look more and more like a club for old men. The war between Hells Angels and the immigrant gang Brothas would change the power structure in the criminal underworld in Denmark, and signaling the beginning of the end of Hells Angels' dominance in Denmark. And it all started in an unlikely place, the free neighborhood Christiania, known for openly selling cannabis for decades in what was called Pusher Street. This small neighborhood was the center of cannabis sale in Copenhagen, with an estimated 90% of all cannabis dealings in the capital happening here. Bullshit MC had controlled this industry in the 80s, but after they were annihilated in the late 80s, the Angels took over this business. The police estimated that there was sold cannabis for between 1 and 3 million Danish crowns every day, but the government refused the police to do anything about it. This had been a point of frustration for the police, with millions of Danish crowns flowing through the illicit trade daily. But in 2003, when a new conservative government had come to power, law enforcement was given the go-ahead to close Christiania and Pusher Street for good. The police raided Christiania, apprehending over 60 people linked to the cannabis trade, and in one swoop, the police had demolished the biggest cannabis outlet in Denmark.
Det er jo nærmest, det er vel succesen med, at vi får fjernet pusherne, som udløser den der kamp om hasmarkedet. Så det var helt sikkert starten på, at indvandrerbanderne pressede sig ind på markedet. Personligt tror jeg, at det er at være med til at udløse bandekrigen i København.
What had previously been an almost monopoly on cannabis sales was now gone, and zealous heirs could now create their own fortune.
Jeg ville lyve, hvis jeg ville påstå, at jeg overhovedet ikke så op til rockermiljøerne. Jynke og Blondie og de drab, de foretog, var helt klart noget, som kørte i mit hoved.
The void left gave rise to an unexpected power shift in the criminal underworld.
Hele bandemiljøet, det var ligesom en ny start, en ny æra i den kriminelle underverden, parallelt med rockermiljøet.
As the immigrant gangs seized a golden opportunity to get in on the cannabis sales, and with this audacious move against the Angels' dominance, ignited the first spark in the coming gang war between the two groups. The new street gangs were young, innovative, hungry, and seized upon this opportunity. Among the players in this dark drama was Abud Mustafa, a mere 15-year-old who now could make his own fortune.
Og allerede som 15-årig, der begynder jeg faktisk at tilbyde det her med kørsel. Så hvis du ringede til mig, så kom jeg bare ud til dig. Så jeg kørte bare ud til folk på mine stjålne knark og leverede hash til dem. Så det var meget uskyldigt, synes jeg selv, i starten, men altså, det udviklede sig til at blive meget groft og afstumpet, ikke?
The immigrants' strong ties to Morocco also granted them direct access to hashish suppliers, eliminating middlemen and safeguarding their profits. It was a lucrative arrangement, and therefore far superior to the contacts that the Hells Angels had in the Netherlands. And with this, there suddenly was a new power factor in the Danish criminal underworld. Fearing the encroaching threat of the new gangs, the Angels sought to counteract their rising influence and power. In their quest, they reached out to other gang members, attempting to sway them into working for them, and contacted the Blackguards gang. But their attempts were not seen favorably by this immigrant gang, and they attacked Ludwig, AHA member wearing the Filthy Few patch for murdering the president of Bullshit MC, was stabbed in the back by knife-wielding adversaries. This could not stand.
Blågårds plads er på det tidspunkt styret af Lille Abte. Det er ligesom om, at de har fået sådan et eller andet mantra om, at hvis du kan være hård eller smart over for en rocker, så er du virkelig noget i de kredse. Og det er vi jo før eller siden nødt til at deale med, altså i Hells Angels regi.
The conflict between the two groups now escalates, and there are several drive-by shootings from both sides, something that was new in Denmark at the time.
Hvis du var en udlænding, der gik klædt på en bestemt måde, eller bare var en udlænding, der gik i et bestemt område, så kunne du risikere at få tæsk af et tæskehold. De kørte jo ind i karavaner i områder og tæskede folk. Det halte ihjel, mand.
The former Hells Angels member, Jorn Junkie Nielsen, admits that some of these shootings were done by members of his own club, something he didn't like. According to him, they used to be men of honor, men who killed while looking their victim in the eye and not killing any bystanders. According to him, this is why Hells Angels' dominance has declined, and why they no longer are the dominant power in Denmark's underworld. They have lost the original honor code, and with that, their respect and dominance. Another explanation, according to Danish biker journalists, is that they are being replaced by a new, young, and hungry generation who doesn't care who the old kings are. The Jackals, as Hells Angels referred to them, calling themselves lions, were now circling the former top predator, with one Danish journalist using an old Scandinavian saying,
"De er udløbet på dato."
Or their expiration date had arrived.
Brothas bliver etableret med det for øje, at man vil beskytte området, altså tryk, avl og modtryk, og vi er klar til at gå lige så langt som de er. Hvis de vil skyde, så kan vi også skyde. Hvis de vil lave aktioner, så kan vi også lave aktioner. Men det er bare vigtigt at forstå og huske, vi lærte det her af rockerne, fordi vi vidste ikke de her ting.
This is very similar to when the Bandidos came as an answer to the Hells Angels dominance in the 90s. The new immigrant gangs also began to dress with back tags and organize themselves, which they had not been very good at before. However, Hells Angels was far from defeated. They established boxing clubs in every Angel chapter, recruiting in young men, and quickly amassed a formidable force of around 100 willing recruits who dreamed of one day becoming Angels themselves. This new gang took on the name AK-81, an emblem of their readiness to answer the call, with AK meaning
Altid klar.
always ready, and 8 and A, the eighth and first letters of the alphabet, symbolized their ties to the Hells Angels. They had created a proxy gang, a shadow army that would fight in their stead while they skillfully manipulated events from the shadows. It was a cunning ploy to maintain control while avoiding a direct contact themselves. Hi, just a short moment of your time before we continue with the video. It literally takes hundreds of hours of planning, research, writing, and editing in order to make a video like this. So if you can afford it, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon or buy me a coffee. It would really help out a lot. Thank you. There is a link below. In the gritty underworld of AK-81, a new crop of young and inexperienced members eagerly sought to prove their worth for their Patreon and master, the Hells Angels. Brian Sandberg, a prominent member and the leader of the boxing clubs the Angels had started, was now targeted while at a cafe. He gets away without any serious injuries. In response to this, Hells Angels publishes their manifest on their website, calling for a war against the immigrants.
Hells Angels gik i dag til angreb på araber og muslimer ved at lægge et manifest ud, hvor de blæser til kamp mod det, som HA kalder Jackaler.
Det manifest er lagt ud i pressen, fordi vi nu i et år har hørt på, at man påstår, at det her handler om narkokrig, og så tænker vi nu er det nok. Og derfor har vi lagt manifestet ud, så er der ikke nogen tvivl om, hvad det er, vi er trætte af, og som jo også de fleste danskere er trætte af.
This very public announcement by Nielsen, where he says that this war is not about the drug sale, but about the increasing violence that these immigrant groups bring, hit home with some Danes.
Brian Mikkelsen, daværende justitsminister, hører Jackal-manifestet, og han er så ude at udtale, at rockerne er lige så afstumpede.
The Danish Minister of Justice, Brian Mikkelsen, and another politician, didn't make the situation better when he clumsily commented the manifest in favor of Hells Angels.
Men det ændrer ikke på, at vi har ret til at forsvare os selv mod kriminelle udlændinge. Når du siger sådan noget her som justitsminister, for det første siger du, men det ændrer ikke noget på, at vi, hvis du sætter dig selv i bås med HA, du har taget parti, forsvarer sig mod kriminelle udlændinge. Og det her, det var guld værd for banderne.
Hells Angels had touched a nerve. The reaction from the immigrant gangs was immediate. To them, this was a declaration of war.
Vi var perkerne, vi var hadet, og HA var en organisation, som var bundkriminelle. Vi salgte kun hash nede i fucking kælder. Alligevel, så var det os, der blev de kriminaliserede og de fremmedgjorte. Det bliver meget nemt for os at rekruttere folk, fordi at I udstøder dem magtigt, ikke?
The recruitment to the immigrant gangs now exploded, fueling the conflict to an all-out war.
Jynke, han udfører et Jackal-manifest. Det er måske ikke alle udlændinge, der forstår, hvad det her Jackal-manifest går ud på, andet end at, okay, han hader os og kalder os for Jackaler. Og det er jo sådan noget der bare for mig er sådan, ja tak. Det er lige, hvad jeg har brug for. Ikke også? Fordi for mig er det en værdikamp, og det vil jeg gerne indrømme. For mig var det jihad på dansk jord. Altså, det var bare, okay, det er muslimer mod vantro, det her, ikke også? Det er Hells Angels, og vi er paradisets skytter og sådan der, ikke også?
But it is not just the immigrant gangs that suddenly got a lot of new recruits. Also, AK-81 and Hells Angels were being run down by young men who want to participate in this so-called race war. The manifesto has later been commented on by biker journalists as a huge PR coup because it had never before been so many that wanted to become Hells Angels and AK-81 before this. However, one of the new recruits, Martin Fried Pedersen, would eventually become the second best, or worst, informant in Hells Angels Denmark's history.
Det jeg ved, det er, at jeg på vandrørene kan høre, at HA har etableret en undergruppering af hooligans og racister og nazister og nynazister, som udelukkende har til formål at gå efter at dræbe muslimer og indvandrere. Og det er selvfølgelig totalt manipulerende, men det er i hvert fald de tanker, jeg bærer. Og på den måde så bliver vi allieret. Og så før jeg vidste det, så var vi bare i en konflikt med de her mennesker.
The violence now increased dramatically, and in 1 week 2 people were killed and 1 wounded in a shooting. There were 18 other attempted murders that year, and 750 people were charged in an astonishing total of 910 court cases. As the writer of the manifest, Nielsen claims that he later had many Danes thanking him for writing the manifest. However, not everybody did agree with Nielsen, and he is now targeted by the immigrant gangs. While out with a member of AK-81, Nielsen is attacked with a knife.
Vi lægger godt mærke til, at der kommer sådan en rød bil kørende langsomt forbi. Den stopper så, og der stiger en mand ud af den. Og så går den jo i gang. Og jeg bliver jo stukket 1 gang i hjertet, og jeg bliver snittet ned over her. Jeg bliver stukket i maven, og jeg bliver til sidst stukket i lysken. Det løber igennem mit hoved. Hvis ikke jeg får fat i den kniv, så dør vi. Men jeg får fat i den, når det lykkes os. Det slutter jo med, at jeg får kniven fra ham og stikker ham 3 gange, fordi nu har jeg fandme fået nok af ham.
When Nielsen gets the upper hand, the assailant does not impress him with his reaction.
Og så begynder han at sidde og råbe på politiet. Han skriger som en stukken gris og sidder og råber på politiet, og det synes jeg er lidt sølle. Selv i det der tænker jeg, hold kæft, du kommer med en 20 cm lang kniv og vil slås. Og nu sidder du og råber på dem, du sviner til hver dag.
Shortly thereafter, Nielsen found himself back behind bars where an encounter awaited him, his first meeting with Martin Fried Pedersen. During his incarceration, Pedersen earned a reputation for wreaking havoc within his cell, adorning its walls with the graffiti AK-81 and generally causing headaches for the prison staff. In a bid to quell his disruptive behavior, the guards turned to one of Pedersen's fellow inmates for assistance, none other than Nielsen. In an ironic twist of fate, these prison guards inadvertently facilitated the recruitment of Pedersen into the ranks of the Hells Angels, a decision that would later solidify his status as one of the most notorious AK-81 members. Pedersen's deep-seated resentment towards immigrants stemmed from his tumultuous school days in a poverty-stricken neighborhood with immigrants and small gangs. Frequent clashes and bouts of violence with these groups only fueled his hostility further. As Pedersen's disdain for immigrants intensified, so did the chaos he unleashed on the streets. His first foray into serious criminal activity occurred when he participated in a drive-by shooting on a motorcycle. His plan to incinerate the bike to obliterate any evidence backfired disastrously due to his lack of experience. Drenching the motorcycle with gasoline, he failed to ensure a safe ignition, resulting in a fiery explosion. His arm ablaze and his jacket melting. He raced to the hospital, driven by excruciating pain. In his panicked haste, he neglected to ensure the bike's complete destruction, leaving behind a crucial piece of damning evidence, a lighter bearing Pedersen's DNA. The authorities wasted no time tightening their grip on Pedersen's life. They initiated a phone surveillance operation targeting him and his girlfriend. Pedersen was subsequently given a chilling task by the Angels, to shoot a man in a kiosk. Expecting the victim to be an immigrant, he was taken aback when he realized the target was a fellow white individual. Not wanting to disappoint his Patreon and masters, he closed his eyes and fired his weapon relentlessly.
Så ligger han ned sådan, hvor øjnene helt spærret op. Han ligger ned på gulvet der.
However, his inexperience and lack of skill ultimately saved the victim's life, but leaving him severely wounded. While fleeing, Pedersen was already haunted by guilt and remorse over what he had done.
Og også det, der var tilfældet med MFP, han gik jo også rundt og havde de vildeste samvittighedskvaler over, at han havde ramt en uskyldig. Men det er jo ikke noget, man kan snakke med folk om. Du kan jo ikke gå ned i Møllerparken eller Blågårdsplads eller hvor, eller hos HA, og så begynde at begræde, at folk er blevet ramt uskyldige.
In a moment of desperate confession, he unburdened himself to his girlfriend, making a grievous and unforgivable mistake in the unforgiving world of bikers. She, in turn, shared this shocking revelation with one of her closest friends over the phone, a call monitored by the police. It triggered a sweeping wave of law enforcement actions that led to the apprehension of 30 individuals connected to both AK-81 and Hells Angels. Among them was Pedersen. Initially, Pedersen maintained a defiant silence in the face of police questioning, yet his vulnerability became a target for the authorities, who resorted to threatening the involvement of his parents and girlfriend as potential witnesses. Caught in a tightening web, Martin Fried Pedersen found himself trapped. The ominous words of the police hinted that Hells Angels now harbored suspicions of him turning informant. Fueled by fear and a burning desire to shield his loved ones from harm, Martin made a life-altering decision. In an alliance with law enforcement, he agreed to cooperate and testify against the very organization he had, not long ago, aspired to join. The promise of safety for himself and his loved ones, coupled with anonymity in the witness protection program after serving his sentence, persuaded Martin to cooperate fully. Under the alias
Guldfuglen,
which means the golden bird, signifying a bird that sings all its songs, Martin became the second most damaging witness against Hells Angels Denmark in history after Dan Linge. Among those who faced the force of the law was Brian Sandberg, a formidable figure within the Hells Angels. Alongside 14 other bikers, they were convicted on multiple charges, receiving a total of 112 years in prison. Martin received a 12-year sentence and today lives in the witness protection program and has no contact with his family and friends from his former life. Sandberg was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months and left Hells Angels a few years later. With the arrest of numerous immigrant gang members, Hells Angels and AK-81 members, The conflict gradually eased up and runs out in the sand, with the immigrant gangs now controlling the cannabis business. A total of 6 people had been killed, a 2-digit number had been wounded, and more than 1,000 people had been charged or convicted. The police strategy of cleaning the streets had worked.
Altså, hvis HA's motiv til den konflikt var at banke de etniske minoritetsgrupperinger, som ville træde ind i miljøet på plads, så har de fejlet. Og de er fandme ikke vundet, fordi at det er sket det stik modsatte.
In the early days of the Hells Angels, like well before I was around, there was a brotherhood that was built on simplicity. It was built on the love of motorcycles and riding together and the brotherhood of it. And what happens in criminal organizations is pride and ego and greed get in the way of that. And the motivation changes. And pride and ego and greed will betray you, and it will leave you with nothing.
As Denmark's once dominant force was on the path to recovery, it grappled with the formidable challenges of adapting to a swiftly changing world. Amidst this transformative period, a powerful new player emerged on the scene, known as Satudara MC. They quickly grew in size and soon rivaled Hells Angels in numbers. Satudara stood out, not only for its open embrace of individuals from diverse racial backgrounds, but also for its willingness to welcome former Hells Angels members who had fallen out of favor with their old club. Within the club itself, this era of change sparked an internal conflict. A club that had fostered close and friendly ties with Hells Angels, including some immigrant members, suddenly found itself facing rejection from certain members in HA when they were up for membership. This rejection sparked a conflict and made them join Satudara instead of Hells Angels. The rift with Satudara escalated into a full-fledged war, and the astonishing twist was that even the Hells Angels began accepting former Bandidos members into their ranks. New members who had killed Hells Angels were now brothers with their victims' former brothers, further fragmenting the once unified club.
Jeg tror faktisk, politiet er ved at vinde for alvor for en gangs skyld, og sidder og gnider sig i hænderne, for vi har jo altid sagt, at det eneste, der kan rive Hells Angels ned, det er Hells Angels selv, og det er de rigtig godt på vej til, ikke mindst her i Danmark. Når det handler om magt og penge og indflydelse, så skaber det fjender, og det ødelægger også Hells Angels indenfra.
Jeg har jo kæmpe massive problemer med det her til den dag i dag. Altså har nogle voldsomme psykiske problemer forbundet med de ofre, der er blevet ofret, uden nogen årsag. Det kan kraftedeme stadig knække mig til den dag i dag, og det er også det, der driver mig til vanvid om natten og gør, at jeg ikke kan sove.
There will be more on that conflict in my next biker video, so remember to subscribe and put on all notifications so you don't miss that. And please give this presentation a thumbs up and check out my other videos to see if there are other topics you might find interesting. And I hope to see you in the next one.